The Black Templars are a second founding chapter that are on a crusade to prove their loyalty to the Emperor that they venerate as a god. And today we're painting up one of those Astartes in the form of an Execrator. We will be kicking off the armour with a mix of 3 colours, and this is going to be a small amount of the black, a small amount of the bone, and then a majority of the mix being made up using our dark blue. This mix can then be applied over all of the armour on the model, giving us a nice dark but not black tone that we're able to work from. From there, what we're going to do is start to highlight the model. And naturally, when we're doing this, we can highlight in any preferred style. Here, we're building up thin layers, taking our base and then adding more and more of the bone as we proceed up in brightness. Due to the colours that we are using, the highlights will start to shift through a mid bluish grey up to a pale grey blue, and then finally near pure bone with a hint of that blue just to tie it all in. Now, I know what you're thinking. Damn, I should really subscribe to this channel. And you're probably also thinking that this marine looks more blue than it does black. And in all honesty, yes, you probably should subscribe to the channel. And yes, the model is slightly more blue than it is black. But we're going to be fixing that in a moment, and we're going to be doing that with some black and a fair amount of water. Because we made sure that the initial paint base that we used contains some of this black that we're about to apply, we know that the paint should hopefully gel well with these glazes and won't leave us with such a stark transition. First off, we are going to want to apply a thin coat of this glaze over all of the areas that we've painted black in order to harmonise all of these areas with the tone of the glaze. From there, we're able to apply multiple other glaze passes, but these will be applied in a more selective and precise manner, pulling from the open surfaces towards those shadows and those recesses, building up that shadowy dark area and the intensity of the darkness. In order to paint our gold, naturally, we're going to need a purple and a yellow. When we mix these together in roughly equal parts, we should get a nice dark cool brown, which we can use for our initial base, catching all of the areas that we want as gold before we start to mix in yellow. We're going to, as before with the blacks, add more and more of this highlight colour. More and more yellow will be added to our initial base, and this will slowly move our tone from a cool brown up through a warmer yellow brown before we are eventually edge highlighting using a mix which is predominantly yellow. Don't worry though, these yellow edges won't be so stark because we will be coming in with the final last few steps, and this is where we're going to take the yellow from the mix and as well as grabbing our bone from earlier. Making a mix out of this bone and yellow, we can make a pale yellow which will represent those hot spots of light across all of the metallic areas. Meaning when we apply this, it will be in very small, careful placements. Now, I'm aware that not everyone likes painting non-metallic metal or even likes the look of non-metallic metal, but don't worry, if you're of that inclination, I've got something at the end of the video that will be perfect for you. With that all said, we will be also painting the silvers and the sword and all the metals in a non-metallic silver. Those are the ones we haven't painted in gold, obviously. But before we do that, we will be first needing to grab a red to paint all the random red accessories across the model. Our reds are going to be nice and simple. We're starting from a dark red, which we can base coat all of the various elements with. This base coat will be the foundation of our future layers, which is where we're going to mix in a lighter red, applying these mixes across all of the various elements. There is a difference that we are going to be taking for the various elements. For example, we have the robe. And for the robe, we are highlighting across a process of around 2 highlight layers, still ending with a mix of our bright red and our darker red. Whereas for things like the emblems or anything that might be more solid or metal, we will be applying a few further highlights, using a pure red as the final layer here to help show how these are more solid and potentially reflective materials. We also then have some minor elements like the belts, as well as in this case the skull mask, and for these we are going to make up a base coat mix between a red brown and a more traditional yellowish brown. This mix can go over all of those elements, giving them a uniform base tone. We can then start to divert out from that base tone based on the material that we have. For example, an element like the belt and any other leather items, we can start to highlight these with more of the yellow-brown as we mix this in. Then for elements such as the scroll, what we could do is take our base and then over a couple of layers add in some of the bone to the mix. Before moving quickly through and then adding in a very pale pinky brown, which would be our mid-tone, we will then get up to the parchmenty bone from the mix. We won't, however, be stopping with this for the scrolls. To mask the tones a little, we will be applying a few glazes on the scrolls. The first is a thinned coat of the same dark blue-green which we used for the initial armor base. We will then be applying a dirty tone, which will be made by a similar glaze, this time using a thinned black. And this will tone down any of the brighter areas, as well as any of the green shading applied from our previous wash. The other area that we painted on this model with the brown base coat is the skull, but I'm actually thinking of doing a separate video for the skull masks and options of painting the skull masks for things like chaplains and execrators and things of the like. So I'm not going to be covering it in detail in this particular video, but essentially we took the same base coat mix, went the same route as the leathers, but then pushed it higher with a bit of the bone highlight, giving us that more bone tone that we would want from the skull mask. With that all said, we're going to be jumping quickly across to all of the other non-metallic metal areas that we've done. Those being things like the sword and everything like that. And for those, we are going to be needing a selection of blacks, greys and whites to make the nice reflections. First, we are going to need to coat all of the areas that we want silver in our black, and this is going to give us a nice dark tone to work from. Then what we're able to do is start mapping out our highlights, and here we're mainly focusing on the sword. We are going to lay down a sectioned pattern of highlights, and this highlight pattern is going to be V-shaped across the light long edge of the blade. This will first be done in a mix of our black and light grey. We can then, once this has been applied, reinforce these highlights by thinning down just the pure light grey and applying coats of this across the sharpest edges as well as the centres of any of our highlight passes. Then with a white we can apply a very similar process. This is going to be very, very thin line highlights and edge highlights across any of the edges and bright spots that we've mapped out. From there, we can do some optional fussing. And with this, what we're going to do is thin down our black and or our white, and then use these to push and pull from the various areas. So with our black, we will pull from the light area down into the shadows and going back and forth with our white tone. This will give us a nice balanced and decent blend, and we can use this opportunity to give us a decent ratio of darkness to light. With all of that done, our Black Templar is essentially sorted, and I do like how it came out. I think that we've got a nice bit of nuance in the black armor. Check it out in this little bit of footage and everything like that. And obviously I do remember that earlier I mentioned around an option for those that don't particularly want to paint or particularly like non-metallic metal, and I haven't forgotten you. I would be curious beforehand though, do you like the look of this model? Here's a comparison against a model painted with a different style of black and with true metallics. Let me know down below, which one do you like? Is there one that's preferred over the other? I like the slight depth of colour and nuance that we've got in this Black Templar. But if you are looking for a model with a truer, darker, deeper black, as well as true metallics, then here's the payoff for the promise I made earlier. The video for the Chaos Lord is essentially a very similar scheme to what we've done here, but using a different method. So why not check that out if you're looking for a different style of painting your Black Templars. Otherwise, you're going to need to remember to subscribe so that we can see you next time.